Welcome to the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility, an ongoing inquiry into American political origins and evolving institutions. The Executive Director of the Virtual Center is Dr. Bill O'Brien. He's also your host for this continuing conversation, which returns today. Here he is now, Dr. Bill O'Brien.
Thank you, Bob Kincaid. Thank you, Bob Kincaid, and welcome to the Virtual Center for the Study of the U.S. Constitution and Civic Responsibility. I had to make some notes to myself in saying that because it's been so long since I've been here. It seems like a half a lifetime since we've been together here at the Virtual Center. It's been 2 weeks, and I hope you have missed it. I know that I have. And I appreciate your patience and your willingness to hang in there with us at the Virtual Center. I really believe we've got some kind of exciting things to consider over the next several programs. I hope you will agree. First of all, I would love to tell you that as I look outside, I would be seeing sunshine and green grass and all of that. But I'm not, and I think you all know that. It's tough. It's been the toughest period. In fact, I drove to Florida, as I think I mentioned here a few weeks ago, to spend some time with a friend, and I was due to come back 2 days before I did come back because of the weather situation. Not so much here in the mountains, but in the southeastern part of Georgia and North Carolina, and there were times when I actually was it was unclear that I would even going to be able to get back. So I am back, and I walked into a huge snowstorm here this past weekend, as I'm sure many of you know and can appreciate, and we continue to experience winter. Last night, as I drifted off into Never Never Land, the last thing I heard on the television was the weather forecaster saying, well, it's going to begin to change a little bit for us. We're going to have a dry day, primarily featuring sunshine. Well, it's close to 2 o'clock in the afternoon here in the southern Appalachian region of West Virginia, and so far we haven't seen any sun. It's still overcast. It was actually blowing a little snow up until around noon this morning, so anyway, that not all of that is secondary to the fact that we are back together here at the Virtual Center, and I am so appreciative of the opportunity to be here with you. I would love to hear from you, and I mean that, and I will be giving you our phone number, but let me preface it by saying that one of the issues that we're going to be dealing with over the next several programs, it seems to me, involves the whole issue of conversation and dialogue, and how important it is literally to our republic, to the functioning of this republic. And all I can think of is the Virtual Center here and the opportunity that we all have to share ideas, to learn from each other, to innovate with each other, to criticize each other, and hopefully to all walk away knowing a little bit more than we came to the table knowing. And I think I guess what I'm saying is, in the course of considering and pulling together some of the information that I'll be sharing with you over the next couple of programs, I became more appreciative than ever of the opportunity that we have here at the Virtual Center. And I hope that you will agree. We have a phone number, as most of you who listen regularly know. Our phone number is area code 304-663-4676. That's 304-663-4676, which translates into HORN, H-O-R-N. If you would like to communicate one-on-one directly with me via email, I would love to hear from you. I know that there are some folks out there that would be a little bit reticent about about going on the air and sharing their ideas with a listening audience, and feel much more comfortable doing it one-on-one privately through email. And I understand that. And if that is you and you would like to communicate your ideas or your thoughts on the issues and the topics that we'll be dealing with, I would love to hear from you. My email address is waobrien906@gmail.com. waobrien, OBRIEN, 906@gmail.com. Let me open, first of all, by apologizing for, even though today is our late start, we usually begin half hour late on Tuesdays, 1:30 here in the East. As you know, we're starting 15 minutes after that today. And so our program will be an abbreviated one of an hour and 15 minutes as opposed to our regular Tuesday fare, which covers an hour and a half. Let me tell you why, just briefly, because, and I mentioned that the reason we do start a little bit late on Tuesdays is because I have a Rotary meeting that begins at noon and gets out at 1, and so by the time I get my coat on and get to the car and drive home and get everything ready to go on the air here, it's 1:30 is usually more than enough time for me to make it. Today, however, the program in Rotary was kind of special, at least for the folks here in southern West Virginia. I think, not too long ago, I had mentioned that one of the more exciting things that's happening in West Virginia higher education of late is that West Virginia University seemingly, and I say that advisedly because the final decision has not been confirmed yet, but it appears, and all the media is saying this, that WVU, West Virginia University, is going to be opening a branch campus here in Beckley. They have purchased the old Mountain State University buildings and campus here in Beckley, and so they are in the process of working with current institutions located in southern West Virginia. There are several: Concord University, Bluefield State College, New River Community College. Marshall University actually has programs in the southern part of the state. So West Virginia University wants to make sure that they are able to complement what already exists here rather than compete. It would be foolish to go in and start to compete for the same students in the same programs or to duplicate offerings. It would be a waste of money and it wouldn't really accomplish anything. So consequently, West Virginia University is being very, very careful as they meet with the other institutions and try to make some long-range decisions about the particular programs and offerings that they want to make available here in the Beckley area. The Vice President for Academic Affairs, the Dean of Academic Affairs and Vice President of the University, delivered the program here at the Rotary Club today. And needless to say, the attendance was probably 2.5 times the number of people that it usually is. Consequently, the program didn't even get underway. It usually begins at 12:30. It didn't even begin today till about 1:45. And the dean talked until about 1:15 and then opened up the questions. And at that point, I took the opportunity to sneak out and come home here in order to get on the air with you. So, and again, it's one of those programs that is so vital to this area. I will share with you the fact that she said that there are really two major considerations on the table here. One is service to students. The other is economic development for the region. And as you know, because we are in Appalachia, economic development here is a big issue and interests a lot of people. So consequently, almost everybody who owned a business in this region was at the meeting today, along with the presidents of the other institutions and officials from the public school system, the K through 12 system, and all the rest of it. So it was, a much more cumbersome meeting than the regular weekly meeting is. And so I kind of had alerted Bob Kincaid this morning that it might take a while to get home and get on the air today. So that's the reason we are beginning a little bit late today. We're just approaching the top of the hour. It's now 57 minutes after the hour. And obviously, since we just began, we will not do a regular break here at top of the hour like we usually do. We'll just go right on into our program for the virtual center. A couple of things, just a little thing which I thought was kind of interesting that I thought I would share with you, because I really thought it was interesting, but I don't want to devote a whole lot of time to these things. I found very, very interesting that there is a phenomenon happening in politically in the country right now, which I think is very interesting. And one of our listeners sent me a link to an article about this particular issue. And basically, it's a very, very interesting oxymoron or paradox or irony or contradiction or whatever you might want to call it. But in state after state that has fallen under the control of Republicans, be it the governor's mansion and or branches of the legislature, one of the major themes of this resurgence, if you will, of Republican strength, especially in the off-year elections that we just had in 2012, 2014 rather, is, a common theme basically seemed to be an effort to try to minimize or to tone down or freeze the ability of the federal government to interfere any more than it has been and to reduce the number of federal regulations over the states. The argument being that the more decisions are made locally and the less intrusion or regulatory interference there is from the federal government, the better the nation will be. That is a theme that a lot of people have bought into. Well, it seems like in many of the states where Republicans have been successful in winning control, they are engaged in a process of enacting what is usually referred to as preemptive legislation in order to preempt the power and the independence of cities, municipalities, and other political entities within their states. In other words, the irony here, it seems to me, is the very people who secured power by claiming that it was vital that we move decision-making from the national level to the state level, now that they control the states, are fighting like crazy to keep that power from going to the local level. And many states are enacting preemptive legislation in order to deny local municipalities the kind of independence and freedom that they would need in order to govern their own political constituencies, whether it's cities, counties, or whatever. For example, and this I'm drawing this from the article sent to me by one of our listeners. This is dated February 23rd, so this was just dated yesterday. In Texas, for example, and let me give you an example of what I mean. In the city of Fort Stockton, which is in West Texas, the local fathers in Fort Stockton made a decision to ban plastic bags from grocery stores for environmental reasons. I'm sure you've seen that, you've heard of that movement before. Seemingly, it was a local issue decided by local people And that should have been the end of it. But the issue of communities like Fort Stockton to govern themselves ran into trouble with members of the Texas legislature in Austin. The Republican governor who replaced Rick Perry, by the way, Governor Greg Abbott, has warned that cities are undermining what he calls the business-friendly Texas model with a patchwork of ill-conceived regulations. And so consequently, state legislature in Texas is drafting preemptive legislation in order to deny the Fort Stocktons in Texas the opportunity to make these kinds of independent political decisions without getting them first approved by the state legislature. In fact, and this is toward the end of the particular article, but a realtor, a local real estate developer in Texas, a state senator named Don Huffines, Huffines, has introduced legislation into the Texas legislature that would limit local regulatory powers to issues expressly granted by the state legislature. In other words, if you didn't request permission from your state legislature to govern in this particular area, and we talked about it with Fort Stockton, it was banning plastic bags. But let me suggest some of the other issues that states have been trying to hold off on. One of them is the ability of local communities and urban areas, cities, to provide broadband service to their own citizens. The legislature in several states has moved to block that kind of effort by some larger communities to deliver high-speed broadband to their citizens, obviously for purposes of economic development and education. And what the state legislatures are doing are moving in, claiming that these areas of economic growth, these business opportunities, must be kept available only for the private sector. In other words, it's business that's moving into putting pressure on state legislatures to try to prevent local communities from passing regulations and ordinances which run contrary to their personal self-interest. Besides broadband, one of the other issues is communities that make independent decisions to increase minimum wages, to increase the minimum wage, or to provide sick days, paid sick leave for employees, for public employees. And so basically what we are seeing is that many of these legislatures, because of the takeover, the recent takeover, are staffed principally by new first-time legislators, which has given business and industry a tremendous opportunity to move in and initiate the kind of legislation they want, because they're dealing with legislators who have very little, if any, experience at all. So consequently, this swing toward the right, if you will, at the state level is obviously working quite well for business and industry, which of course many of us would speculate or anticipate right from the very beginning. One of the things I found interesting in this, I thought I would share with you, that Republicans now control 69 state legislative chambers. 60 now. We know that there are 100 states, 50 states. And most of them are obviously two House legislatures. So that means that there are roughly 100 legislative chambers, senates, and houses of delegates, lower houses. Out of the 100 that exist, 69 of them are currently under Republican control. And what we are seeing here is the degree to which these new people who sit in these legislatures with little experience are becoming extremely vulnerable to lobbyists and industrial and corporate interests that are able to band together and put through the kind of legislation that benefits them. And I find this particularly interesting. Of course, another area of interest in this local control thing is the issue of fracking. As you know, there's a lot of controversy about fracking, whether in fact environmentally it's a good thing to do. And you may recall that in the state of New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo banned fracking in the state. In this morning's New York Times, 15 communities in northern New York, 15 so-called, in southern New York, southern tier communities in New York, have been meeting together and contemplating seceding from the state of New York and joining the state of Pennsylvania across the border from them, because in Pennsylvania fracking is thriving. And the southern tier of counties and communities in New York State is right on top of the shale. And of course, what local community leaders are claiming is that there are jobs and that this is their freedom and their independence and their economic viability and all the rest of it. And what right does the governor of New York have in making this kind of executive decision, which basically denies them the right to earn a living and promote the best interests of their own families? So what we are seeing is the contradiction of self-interest as reflected in local communities versus state interests, on behalf of those who control state legislatures. I just think that the whole issue is fascinating in its contradiction, and I wanted to share it with you before we get into something much more substantive, which is really the theme that I had referred to earlier. But I thought that particular issue is very, very interesting. I thought the fact that Republicans control 69 of the 100 potential state legislative chambers in the 50 states is really something worth noting. That gives us an incredible idea as to what's happening in state politics. And the fact that while Mitt Romney was not able to win the White House in 2012, the fact of the matter is those people that backed him financially and politically have been doing very well by working on the state level, and have been very successful. And now we're seeing what's happening. As a historian, I was particularly struck by this story because if you can go back to your school days for a moment, if you ever had the opportunity to compare the Constitution put together or drafted by the Confederate States when they seceded from the Union, you would be struck by the fact that many of the rights that Southern states claimed made it necessary for them to secede from the Union are rights that the new Constitution they drew up for the Confederacy denied them under the new Confederacy. In other words, these Southern states had seceded from the Union, but the Confederate Constitution specifically denied the right of states to secede. The very behavior that brought the Confederacy into being is denied to its members once the Confederacy is created. And that obviously is a contradiction. And it seems to me that this particular issue of the relationship between local municipalities and cities and the state legislatures is also, in many cases, an interesting contradiction or irony, if you will. Anyway, I thought it was interesting, and I thought you might like to you might want to be aware of it. You can look in New York Times and New York Times today, February 24th, and you'll find the piece in there about the Southern Tier communities in New York that are talking about about secession. I found it very interesting. Just one more comment on this, and then I'll drop the issue. But I found it very, very significant that one of the members of the Texas legislature who is driving this effort toward preemption, passing preemptive legislation in order to deny political independence to local communities, was asked by a member of the media about what he said was the fairly obvious contradiction here. That you are denying local communities the very kind of local control over their own affairs that you claim the states had a right to from the federal government. And the response to that issue, and let me quote this exactly. The response is that you're making a mistake. And this is the quote. What we're arguing is that liberty, not local control, is the overriding principle that state and local policymakers should be using. This is a quote from James Quintero, who is the director of the Center for Local Government at the Texas Policy Foundation, talked about this issue of preemption as being new to the conservative movement in Texas. And he resented very, very loudly even the suggestion that this was critical.
Hey, Dr. Bill?
And the way he's... Yes, Bob?
I just wanted to jump in there. It kind of seemed like you were at the end of a sentence.
Yeah.
You've got our buddy Horst.
Oh, great. Well, thank you.
Go ahead, Horst.
Horst, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi.
Hey, wonderful. How are you?
Well, very good. It's very nice to catch up with you again after your trip out. I'm glad that you made it back safely. I was a little concerned.
Thank you. I was, but it was. I'll be very honest with you, Horst. It was. This is a friend of mine that we've been friends for 45 years, and he's having some health problems, and he lives in Florida. And I've been promising for 2 or 3 years to get together, and I hadn't done it. And I became really concerned. And my wife was encouraging me here and said, "Look, you'll never forgive yourself if something happens to him and you don't get down there." And so based on that, I made the decision to go. And And I'm glad I did. I never expected to run into the kind of weather we've had here. You don't have this kind of weather where you are.
No, it doesn't even freeze here, which is a good thing because the entire road system and structure is based around the assumption that freezing is something that doesn't happen here. So if it ever if global climate change ever affected us in that regard, we would have some serious problems, especially in the mountains, I can tell you. But anyway, yeah.
Oh my heavens! Yes.
Oh yeah.
Well, what's been happening with you?
Well, I don't know if I got a chance to catch up with Bob a couple of weeks ago. I have been in a new job for about the last 5 or 6 weeks, and it's been a really intensive kind of schedule. So as you know, like the time zones don't work out very favorably for me to try to call in or listen live or anything like that. Normally.
I understand.
But on top of that, the whole situation has been exacerbated rather heavily by, my current work schedule, which is just it leans towards the ridiculous. But
is it a good thing? Is it a positive thing?
Oh, it's a good thing. It's exactly what I needed and what I wanted at just the right time. It's great. It's kind of a step in towards something completely unrelated, but it all works out. It's very convenient for me.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, good. Hey, listen. If it's a good thing for you, then it's worth it. And I'm sure glad to hear from you. This is wonderful.
Oh, I've been really looking for an opportunity to try to call in for pretty much the last 3-4 weeks at least.
Oh, yeah.
And if it's not too much of a distraction or a derailment from whatever you were planning to get into today,
go right ahead.
I wanted to talk with you and maybe Bob, if he's not too reticent to join in on the call, but about Omelas.
Reticent? Me?
What? Bob Kincaid reticent? My God.
Oh. Well, he's I love it when Bob joins in. One of my favorite programs that you've had here actually is when Devin called in and the three of you got to rapping about all kinds of things really. That was a really enjoyable thing. So but Omelas, I hope I'm not bringing up a horse that's already been beat to death there. But,
hey, listen, that's fine. Go ahead. When I was in Florida visiting, I made the fellow I was visiting aware of it, and we printed the short story off, and he read it, and we spent one whole evening talking about that short story, and I was telling him how many hours of programming we had devoted to this. I said it's a testimony to how rich the story is, I think.
No, yeah, it is. It's completely. Ursula Le Guin is one of those people that came into my orbit, briefly because I was a literature student, back in the university days, and so I've always kind of considered her regarded her as a serious person, but I've only read one of her books, Left Hand of Darkness, back when I was in my 20s, and I just all I remember is being faintly irritated by it. I don't remember anything else about it, but this short story is like one of those perfect stories because it is like you say. We had like 5 or 6 really rich, deep, wide-ranging discussions that's based on the story that must only be about 1,000 words, I suppose.
It's not that long. You're right.
It's 3 or 4 pages. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous. I mean, it's perfect.
It is. It's wonderful.
This is what short fiction is. That's the ideal. That's like the holy grail of that sort of thing.
Sure.
So well, anyway, I've been sitting here thinking and listening, and fortunately, my new job is one of those things where I frequently get a chance to plug an earphone into one of my ears and just listen to things. So I've been going back over, some of the old podcasts, but some of the podcasts where these things have been discussed, and just going over these things. And this has really been on my mind seriously, for 3 or 4 weeks now.
That's great.
However long it's been.
Sure.
And so I thought I thought about ways of sharing my perspective on it. I could write an email or something, but it would turn into like 20 pages probably, which again is like kind of a testimonial to the power of the story, like where the story takes 3 pages, but you could write an entire concordance to go with it.
Sure.
Yeah, so I don't really exactly know where to begin, but I guess my conception of the whole thing is that I don't think it was intended originally to be a political kind of a statement, if you will. Mm-hmm. And this, one of the reasons why I wanted to get Bob in on the conversation here is because the two of you have had so much rich discussion on this subject, and one of the topics that came up is the idea of anarchy.
Right.
As this is like some kind of a supposed contract of government, and what if we just all walked away from it?
Right.
And I don't think that's what it's about.
Okay.
What I read into this story is it's more of an illustration of like just the fundamental what do you call it? Like a paradox of human existence, which is to say, a tension between individuality and society, civilization. And you did actually bring up it, and I didn't catch it the first time through. The second time when I was listening at work, I caught it that you brought in Alfred Tönnies anyway.
Yeah, Alfred.
Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft, which is perfect. I think this falls right into that.
I do too.
To bring it as briefly as possible, I think the child is a symbol of a psychological reality that we face, which is that inside we are cut off and isolated and individuals, and no amount of civilization or relationships with others can ever completely bridge that gap. Basically, that's the simplest I can put it. I don't think the anarchy thing works out, because if you look at Omelas, the civilization, it is already an anarchy, an anarchic organization. Okay. There is no king, there is no stock market, and there is no clergy. Mm-hmm. And without those 3 levers of control over human existence, what do you have? You have a utopia, basically. The argument is, as I see Lagan putting it forward, is like, let's just assume that humanity got to some utopian future where, and she says at some points, like, you'll listen to my words and you'll think that I'm imagining like some kind of fairy tale land in the past. Right. No, this is not the past. This is the future. This is when humanity has figured everything out. Mm-hmm. And we've gotten through we've gotten over wars. We don't have an army, and by extension, you notice that Omelas doesn't have any police either, or at least they're not worth mentioning if they do.
No.
We don't have a king. We don't have a stock market. We don't have a stock market. What does that mean? We don't really have an economy. That means there's no money. That if people work, is because they choose to, not because they have to. Mm-hmm. All the human concerns are taken care of. Let's just assume that somehow we've taken care of all this. All this stuff is magically get done with. And these are not simple people. They're not stupid. They're not ignorant. They're not dumb. They're not, whatever. They have a rich life. They have rich relationships. What do you have when that's taken care of? All right. Well, what do the people of Omelas do?
Okay, I think. Well, I get the feeling that basically what she's saying is they only do what they need to do to stay alive. That it. I mean, we mentioned the Gesellschaft Gemeinschaft thing.
Right. Yeah.
My sense was that this, in Tönnies' language, this would be the ideal Gemeinschaft, where everybody is free to do what they want, but what they want is to enjoy each other.
It's what everyone else wants.
Well, but okay, my reticence is at an end.
Oh, that's good.
Go for it.
Oh, good. but there's reference to their parks. and they're and they're public structures, so they've had to have come to some agreement as to the creation of those.
Okay.
And that requires some sort of coordinated action.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't build a pyramid by committee.
Right.
One thing that one thing I didn't point out that I would like to just keep this in mind is how many times in this short story Legan says, whatever you want. If you imagine it this way, okay, let it be this way. If you would like to see beer, hey, let's have some beer.
Let's have some
drugs,
beer.
Okay, great. There's a drug. Although people don't really need it because drugs are an escape, and there's nothing to escape from because all that stuff.
Are you there, Horst?
I think we may have lost him, Bob.
Ay.
What a wonderful comment, though, about what do they do? I mean, that's really a great question. Because you're right, Bob. I mean, there are structures, there are parks. Somebody must have designed them. Somebody must have built them.
Unless they were built by the old ones.
Yeah. But I mean, and
are you there, Horst?
Sorry, you there?
Yeah.
We are.
We were just waiting on you.
I had an internet drop there. I don't know if it was because my headset ran out of power or if it was just the web. I think my ISP sometimes does random sweeps just to kick people off to see if they're awake or not. So
nice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Where did you lose me?
Well, we were just talking about your comment that when your question as to what people in Omelas do. And Bob, and I was making reference to Bob's comment about the structures and the parks. Somebody must have designed them. Somebody must have built them. Somebody must maintain them. Mm-hmm. But it seems to me that she is very, very explicit that her purpose is not to talk about that.
Right, exactly.
I think she goes out of her way to say that don't worry about these things. I mean, like you're missing the point if you do.
Right.
Yeah. But sorry, Bob. I stepped on you. You go ahead.
No. I was about to say that you are you're free to put in any frills, any details that you wish, but she's not much interested in that.
Yes, exactly.
Right. It's not her purpose. Yeah.
No.
But at the same time, like one of the things I do remember having the impression of reading it again, like back as a literature student, was that she is also the kind of writer that really enjoys the ambiguities that arise from, not specifying certain things too. So who knows?
Yeah.
But and literature is like that though. I mean, like that you're not supposed to put everything on a plate for people because that would kind of defeat the whole purpose. But right.
Well, I would just observe that actually there's a kind of and this goes back to what you said, Horst, about Dr. Bill's program generally. That with this short story and with what Dr. Bill does as well, dedicating several days to the examination of a topic, there's something almost Asian about it. Because I think back, for instance, to The Art of War, where you'll have a very simple assertion by Sun Tzu, and then there's 97 generals or wise men or sages or whatever, all of whom will explain what it means because of the presence of one word.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I don't see that as hair splitting. I see that as a different approach to truth seeking as opposed to the classical Western and particularly Greek dialectic.
Right. Well, I guess the Greek dialectic would be, what leaps immediately to my mind is the whole Socratic thing, where you have a dialogue where it's a give and take and a back and a forth, right? But there's still a linearity to it, whereas what you describe actually kind of reminds me of a tree structure where you can look at it, vertically or horizontally, and say, suppose Sun Tzu is at the top of the tree, and at lower stages of the tree all the way down to the trunk are the 97 other generals, and each one of them represents a branching out, and we go this way horizontally. Whereas, once you get to the apex, the top, and that's where you have the highest level of perspective, where you can look down on the whole thing and see what it adds up to.
Right, because they're all saying he's right because.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of, no, he completely got this wrong in The Art of War.
Right. Yeah, but there's always, there are avenues, and there's all these. It's a tangential kind of a thing.
Well, and you could argue that it's you say a tree. I was thinking web.
Also, yeah, definitely.
And it's I don't know. I don't know. It seems to have more of a feel of what the cloud, so to speak.
Yeah.
Where everything is equally accessible. And so I think just to bring this around before I completely ruin the conversation.
You're making the conversation. What are you talking about?
Bob, it's that reticence again. You got to get over that.
Daggum shrinking violets,
I think I've started kind of a meme here. Oh, anyway, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of plant life, isn't it? But to loop this back around, she invites all of this by specifically by virtue of the vagaries of her description. It can be anything that we want it to be, as long as we operate within the one structural sine qua non, and that is that child.
Yeah. Is it the child, or is it what the child represents?
Well, I think the child is what the child represents. If you want to get right down to it, I don't, and I don't want to be the anti-hair splitting faction. Well, okay, why not? But I mean, I think it really doesn't. If you get right down to it, that doesn't matter so much. And again, the child is such a complicated thing, and it's really hard to find a starting point with this. But I would just say, I guess, just because you have to say something, that the child is not. Well, I mean, it's a piece of literature. It's not real. It's not a literal child. I remember the conversation between you, Dr. Bill, and Bob about where did the child come from? Was it taken from somebody? Or whatever. I mean, who would have taken the child? There's no army. There are no police, so there's no authority. So who's going to go snatch a child away from a mother in Amalas, or to go abroad to take one away from someone? And it's considerations like this that made me think. It's like, look, it's just there, and I think it is just there because what the child represents to me is the inner part of human nature that cannot connect. That is an animalistic nature, and I think this is a reason why it's an it and not a he or a she. There are two main reasons that I see for this, and one is because the child represents each of us, each of the citizens of Amalas, and each of the people that read the story. It has to be an it because people of both genders read the story. So if you make it a he or a she, you automatically alienate half of your readership. Because they're not able to identify with on a guttural level, number one. Number two, this represents an animal instinct, or a pre-civilization instinct, and gender is a social construction. And this is something that I think represents something that happens before that. Now, it is true that the child recognizes language, or did, because it has some vague memories of a mother and speaking, and is able to say, please, let me join you, let me be with you, be cool to me, I will be good, and that to me is just like a fundamental, longing that comes from a sense of isolation. And, the age is important too. The child is actually 10 years old, but appears to be about 6. It is degraded. It is in decline. It is emaciated. It's all these things. But at the age specified, And also, the children of Amalas are advised that the existence of this child between the ages of about 8 to 12, I think, something like this. This is the precise psychological age when children grow up and begin to psychologically individuate themselves from their surroundings. You become a human individual. You become you have a strong sense of self, and you start to have your own personality, and you're not dependent on others, but at the same time, you lose something. You don't exactly lose something. You lose an illusion, basically. You lose the illusion that you're connected fundamentally with the world around you. It goes away, and it's not coming back. And at some point, that realization comes into you, and then it is really, I'm not going to call it damaging, but it's hard to deal with. And I think that's why people rail against it. Some people in Amalas don't even need to see the child. They know it's there. And I think that's also, Dr. Billy, you said so many times, what does it say about us as a people that we know Amalas can't be real unless there's this child in the cellar? Oh, now it makes it real. The point, what it says is, you, me, we all, everybody that reads that story, we've seen that child. We know it exists. We know it's there. We know without even being told. Even if we don't know it overtly, we have a sense of it. It's something that you have to come to terms with, in the transition to becoming an adult in the world as we know it. Mm-hmm. And that's the short version.
Well, the one thing I would comment, I just throw this in for what it's worth because I can't elaborate on it because he doesn't. But the interesting thing is, I recall David Brooks makes the point in his New York Times piece on this subject that another way of looking at it would be from a psychological perspective.
Yeah,
and that's where you are here.
I just want to say in passing, I mean, you made the point early on that David Brooks, say what you will about him and what you think about him, this and that. He's made an excellent point here. It's all very cogent and coherent and stuff like that. I actually read that article. I didn't think it was that well written.
Okay.
Part of the reason was because he just threw that. He actually, the article I read, he just tacked on at the very end of it this sentence. Other people see this as a psychological.
That's right. That's what I'm referring to. And he doesn't elaborate in any way at all. I mean, basically, I didn't make anything of that because he didn't.
No, and he just stuck it at the end of this column as an addendum, and I was like, I was thinking, if I submitted a paper like this when I was a student, I would have lost an entire letter grade just for making a conclusion like that, just because it's not logical.
No,
it's like this. No. But I think Bob said this a couple of weeks ago. It's the larger point is boy, to take that story and to distill from it the message that there's a child in the cellar in Amalas, and therefore it's okay to bomb children in the Middle East because we have to, just to make our civilization run and have cell phones. I mean, that's just...
Well, that's the moral equivalent of pointing to Jesus saying, the poor ye have always with ye, so it's okay to have poor people.
Yeah.
Yeah, or Paul, or who had a sword? One of them had a sword. Peter, Paul, I don't
Peter,
know.
Put up thy sword. Those who live by the sword shall die by the sword, and all they get out of it is, hey, he had a sword.
Yeah, but and a sword.
There's one issue here that I want to make sure we consider, and that is that the author more than once makes the point that we need that child or something like that child to be there in order to relate to the entire thing. That it's myth until that child is introduced, and then suddenly now we got something that everybody can relate to, and I think that's what touches on this psychological thing, because when you said that child, Horst, you said that child is all of us, and is each of us, and and that it seems to me that there's really something to that, because what she is saying is you can't understand any of this other good stuff until that's there, and then suddenly the whole thing becomes real.
Right, exactly. That's why parables work, because if she had simply written a lecture in which she said, we are all like unto a small child, blah blah blah, and we're isolated and we can't, yada yada. Everybody walks away going, I guess.
Yeah.
But if you introduce, it's a child. It's not an impoverished adult.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an animal either, which is also important.
I don't know. I think if it was a puppy or a kitten, or maybe a dolphin or a gorilla.
Well, I think it's still important for the reader to identify personally with it, though, and that's why it has to be a person, but it can't be a he or a she.
Right. It has but
heing and sheing it would remove, like I said. I've made the point. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. But I think it's well taken. This is why, and we can verge over into some other territory here. This is why Joseph Campbell's The Power of Myth remains as important as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because it points out the means by which there's nothing wrong with mythology. I remember Dr. Bill the shocked and hateful look that I got that first year that I was working with you on the PRISM program when I referred to things out of Genesis as myth, and that one woman turned around and said, "They're not myths; they really happened."
Yeah, I remember that.
Myth is how we access the spiritual. Myth is how we access truths that are larger than ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think Horst, if I'm on the same page with you, the child occupies that space.
Well, I think it occupies them. Actually, I don't know if myth is how I would classify it. I think it's more of a kind of a metaphor than that. It's just kind of a shortcut to explaining something that we face in civilization. I guess I didn't quite get where I was going before, but Omelas to me, and it just occurred to me 20 minutes ago, or 20 minutes before I joined the call, rather, that Omelas could be reshuffled to be Salome.
Well, actually, the name comes from the fact that she was driving one day and saw a sign for Salem, Oregon.
Oh, okay, terrific.
Oh, okay.
That was one of the things I actually avoided, looking into specific details because I didn't want to have my judgment clouded by biographical facts, because authors will take things like that and work them into something that and you can actually go down rabbit holes that way. But but anyway. No, but the point was just to say, just to imagine that humanity got their act together and there were no more problems. In Madison's terms, let's suppose that men were the angels that they always set out to be, and now they don't need all this government. They don't need all this stuff. And what are they going to do with their time? What do the people of Omelas do? What are they doing? What do they do in the entire story? There's nothing. They have parades. The whole story, in the town, what is taking place? There's about to be a race.
Yep. There's music,
and that's happening in a marshy kind of a green area, which just screamed Fertile Crescent to me for some reason. Mm-hmm. But that may or may not have anything to do with anything. And for some reason, she mentions that the race course is a diagonal line. I don't know what that means either. I really don't. I've thought about that. Whatever. Okay, fine. Race, and they are eating and drinking, and they are just being friendly, enjoying their relationships with each other.
Right.
And really, if you look at for instance, psychological studies and stuff like that, what they tell us is that the most satisfying, apparently the purpose, what makes people the happiest, including in the workplace or wherever, is the quality of the relationships they have with other people around them. So I think that this kind of encapsulates that. Everyone's in their procession. They're walking down the street. They're chatting and they're talking with their neighbors. And some are eating, and there's some guy with some eating food, and he's got some in his beard or something like that. Okay, but the point is, and what kind of brings it into relief for me is she mentions the horses, and she says horses are the only species that share man's love, she says man or human, whatever, our love for ritual and ceremony, something like this. And that's really what it comes down to. Like the entire, the entire city of Omelas is really apparently structured around pomp and circumstance, and just an excuse to do something and have a race. Yeah. And you start thinking about the race of history. You think of race like in its different, particular interpretations. Like I think of a race of a river or something like that. Like the course of history, the course of, time flowing, again from that marshy, green, meadowy kind of a thing where the children play naked and they have mud all over them and stuff like that, which does stand in some contrast to the lonely child trapped deep inside the heart of the entire thing, muddied with its own feces. There are many, contrasts drawn, and the most obvious one, and it actually kind of disappointed me when she overtly mentions the contrast between the child playing the flute at the end and the child in the cellar, because I thought it didn't need to be drawn together that
right
particularly, but whatever, she might have been. Mm-hmm. But you will notice though that those two children are without language. The one in the cellar had it but lost it. And I think that's significant in a lot of ways, because I think as we get older, we stop listening to the voice of that child. And this is one of the things that I don't know the history of these things. I guess she wrote this in the 70s, right?
70s, yes. 1972,
72 or 76. 72, okay. A lot of things were happening in the 70s, and I don't know how to place these things chronologically, but there was an inner child, psychology movement that I think probably happened closer to the 80s than that. I don't know about that. But there's also Eastern religions. Bob mentioned like a kind of an Eastern kind of feel to this. And the very first thing that occurred to me when I was listening to this is it sounds like a parable of enlightenment.
Yes.
That is to say, those who walk away from Omelas. Mm-hmm. And I guess what I'm saying is that to me it presents a basic paradox of existence. The thing that makes us the happiest and most satisfied in our lives as we know it is our relations with each other. Parents think of the child in the cellar and they grab their children tighter. Why do they do that? Well, they do it because they don't want to think of their children suffering the way that child does.
Yeah, there's transference. And
at the same time, they realize that child is going to suffer that, and because they know from their own experience that they have had that same suffering too, and there's no getting around it. The child wasn't taken from any place; it was there all along. It just showed up, and it doesn't age beyond a certain point because it's always there.
Agnes said something to me the other day. Of course, she said, "I don't think our children know how much we love them," and I replied, "I don't think any child does." Until the child has children of his or her own, because it's not an element of existence that is available to them. And I think I think it's something that comes with adulthood. But I also want to go back because you mentioned Fertile Crescent, and it's one of those.
It's a trigger, isn't it?
Oh, sure it is. Because the thing that I thought all along is that this is either it's either a metaphoric roadmap or it is some sort of philosophical imperative that says that our agrarian, industrialized, so-called civilized existence is not always going to be with us, and I think there is at least a scent within the short story of inquiry as to whether we will return to a more natural state akin to that of the hunter-gatherers, for whom that was the definition of human life for 99.9% of our existence. And what I mean by that is the fact that if you get right down to it, it is undisputed, I think, within anthropological circles. I'd have to check in with Dr. John on this to be sure. But I think it's undisputed that hunter-gatherer societies have vastly more leisure time than we industrialized, so-called civilized people do.
You did mention that before, yeah. That was, and it's a point well taken. Although, at the same time, if you look at Omelas as a civilization, it's built around leisure. What else are these people doing?
That's yes. And her, see, the way I read it, I mean, my sense was that until the child appears in the story, we can't understand Omelas, because what sustains those people for most of their day is something that we keep hoping we'll get, but we can't get to because we really don't understand it unless we're able to contrast it with something horrible like the existence of that child. And it's only when the child is introduced into the equation that the whole thing begins to make sense to us. You know, I mean, that's the way that's the way, and I think I had the feeling that she was telling us, criticizing us in a way, by saying, don't you realize that you look at the world the same way all the time, and the things that we consider to be important. She made the point, and I think Horst made this point. She made the point: you want beer, introduce beer. You want bullet trains, introduce bullet trains. And it was almost like she's saying, those are the things that are meaningful to you, but in the real world they mean nothing. And so therefore we can put them in or leave them out here. It doesn't matter, because it doesn't really change the overall meaning of the story. Anyway, maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I saw.
I would say something related to that. I would just say, like, I think that she is definitely saying it's not important. I think really it's just introducing a situation. It's just like, let's just suppose that we don't have to worry about all these things, and there would still be a problem. You know, it's like, clear away all the struggles, all the politics, all the things that we worry about from day to day. Most of the stuff that occupies our time is figuring out where our next meal is going to come from, and trying to, protect ourselves from people who are also worried about where their next meal is coming from. And you take all that away, and what would you have? What is your utopia? It kind of, I was reminded of, like, different cultures' conceptions of heaven. Like I was reminded of a joke by Alan Watts that used to say, like, Christian children, when they hear what heaven's about, are actually shocked and horrified, because it sounds like an endless church service, that just goes on to infinity.
Yeah.
And I thought, contrast that to, like, the Norse, like the version of Valhalla, where you sit around a table drinking and feasting and recounting tales of battle. It's like, and that actually sounds much more user friendly at the outset, but
it gets boring pretty quick too.
Yeah, well, especially if you're not out, having new conquests and stuff like that, not generating new experiences. What are you going to talk about? You told that story 37 hours ago.
And the next thing you know, it's the joke about the old folks on the porch of the retirement home yelling out numbers. and the new guy tries it, and he says 16, and everybody just looks at him stone faced, and he says, "What's wrong?" And they said, "Oh, you told it poorly." But no, that's very, very true, and so it's a question of bliss, and we've got, I guess, that the child has to be there in order.
Well, the point is that the child, again, I don't mean to step on it, but I never. This is the thing. It's like I have this big idea, and there are all these loose, unraveled threads. Just to close one point off, the child has to be there because the child is there.
Well,
now we're on Schrodinger Street.
Oh, well, okay.
Sorry.
Don't open the box. It will be fine.
Yeah.
No, but no. I mean, it's there because, and it's not a question of. The funny thing to me is, like, no matter whether it's the people who rail against the reality of and curse their existence for the rest of their life, or the ones who walk away, do you notice in the story that no one ever actually attempts to set the child free?
Right.
They can't. It's impossible. It's not a contract or a covenant that you enter into. It's just a recognition of a basic fact of existence, which is that we are individuals, and once you individuate psychologically, there is no way to fully integrate with the people around you, no matter how hard you try or how rich an integrated experience.
Right. Just exactly. Not to walk on you.
No, go for
it. I got to jump in here. Exactly, because. From a very simplistic approach, I remember the first time reading Plato's Republic, and wondering why nobody walks in and goes, "Hey, assholes, it's a cave."
Yeah.
Turn around.
Oh God.
Because you can't. Because you can't.
Yeah.
That's a limitation upon metaphor and a limitation upon simile and descriptive.
Right. You can't push it. You can't stretch a metaphor too far, and I think that was part of the whole thing. It's like, well, let's not worry too much about where the child came from and all this stuff.
I'm still intrigued by the people who walk away. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I know to this day what they're walking away from.
But so is she. It's the title of the story.
Yeah.
No, that's the thing. It's like, I think I have the answer to that, but I don't know if I can get there from here. We have apparently 3 minutes till the close of the show.
Oh, hell, my goodness. How did that happen?
It's, what a...
Well, for God's sakes, condense it and try, because I can't wait 24 hours.
Tell us what the reason is about the people who walk away.
Well, okay. Like I said, originally it struck me as a parable of Eastern Enlightenment, along the Buddhist lines or something like that. You're presented with a double bind of existence. On the one hand, you have your greatest satisfying, longing is in the richness of the relationships you make with other people. But at the same time, and there are a lot of things in the way, in normal human existence, and we spend most of our lives just trying to take care of the things that we really should not be bothered with, but we are, whether you're going to get eaten when you walk out the door, or whether you're going to have a door to walk out of because you can't pay the rent. No matter how sophisticated we get, it seems like, but what the author is saying is, forget about that. Let's just posit a perfect, civilization, and what happens? Well, there's still a problem. There is a discontent. There is an individual. And I think also in animal nature. I think that's why the child is just so horrified at the sight of the mops. Well, the mop is in its own way, a symbol of some kind of order, trying to impose cleanliness on a world that is just not clean, as you can tell by how clotted up and matted up the heads of the mops are, for instance. So, and to the child, it is a completely foreign and horrifying thing. It's just not. It's completely foreign. Unrecognizable. Yeah. Okay, fine. It's hard to stay on course with this.
Yeah, I know.
But those who walk away are the ones who look at the whole thing and say, you know what, this is nonsense. This is ridiculous. This is not satisfying. If this is the best we can do, I don't want to have a part of it.
Okay.
And you will notice whether they go north or whether they go west, they go into the mountains. And the mountains, I guess, represent some kind of a border of this world. If not the world of human civilization, it is at least the world that encloses and encompasses the Amalas world anyway. Now, right. I've kind of pondered over the significance of going north or going west, and north is cold and isolated, and and it could be like a suicide thing. I don't know. West could be like new frontiers or something like that, or it could simply be that in the 70s when she was writing it, she did not want to say east because east at that time meant, a lot of
Cold War.
Well, no, not even that. I think more like the Eastern philosophy, spiritualism that was coming into and it was very, very, for the most part, badly understood in the West. and I think maybe she could have arguably been trying to avoid making a reference to that.
Okay.
I don't know, but whatever. I mean, like it may not have any significance at all. I mean, like, you know, MLS has a port. What about that? Why don't they get on a boat? They don't. Again, we may be trying to squeeze an analogy, a metaphor too hard, and you know, sometimes a sprinkle on a cake is just a sprinkle. It doesn't mean anything. You know, that kind of thing. But whatever it is, I think those who walk away are the ones that just don't accept that this is the best we can do. And again, that's that in the past weeks I've had like many much more elaborate ideas about how to put that into words, but I can't do it right now. So
that's okay.
Well done.
I think we're up, but this is the fastest hour and 15 minutes I've ever spent in my life. If my whole life went like this, it'd be gone. Hey, listen, thank you.
Oh,
thank you so much.
I've been just chomping at the bit to be here. I wish I could do it at least every week.
I wish you could too. Hey,
all right, I'll let you guys wrap it up. I'll get off.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Horst. Have a great
Bob,
evening. Yeah, Bill.
Let me just say goodbye because I know we're over. We'll be back again tomorrow. I'm going to have to spend some time digesting this one. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Bob.